Tyler Skluzacek.
Or Tyler Skluzacek.
Tyler of my Bivy.
Hello everybody, this is Dr. Cody Rall. Today we're talking with Tyler Skluzacek, who was all over the news last year for developing a wearable that prevents nightmares in PTSD patients. I met Tyler at a hackathon where we brainstormed the ideas that eventually became My Bivy. Tyler will explain in detail how My Bivy works at the end of this video, but in short, it's a wearable around the wrist that tracks sleep movements. If it senses the patient is slipping into a traumatic nightmare, it will vibrate, bringing them out of the nightmare and preventing that process from ruining their sleep for the night. Now, Tyler was in town this weekend for the Psychiatry Innovation Lab, so we decided to sit down and talk about his experiences in the past year, which included programming the wearable, bringing it to clinical trials, and communicating with the news media.
Tyler, awesome to have you here.
Cody, thanks for having me.
We go back over a year.
1 year and 2 weeks.
So what was the date that we did the Hack DC event?
September 25th through the 27th.
Epic.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
It was a good one.
You've done quite a few. Have you done very many hackathons since then?
I've done 2 others.
Okay, how were those?
Good. I think I was a finalist in both of them. We made some weird things. One of them I made an app that just chooses random activities to do when you go to a new city. Another one was a public speaking trainer, but both of them kind of didn't win, nor were they that good of ideas.
Yeah, but the Hack DC one went quite well. That one was PTSD focused, right?
Yeah, so the theme of the competition was finding a mobile solution for PTSD. So I'm from Chicago, or I'm from Minnesota initially, and I actually flew out here based on just the theme of that hackathon alone.
Right, just on a whim.
Yeah.
And you ended up winning it, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the app that you developed?
Yeah, so the app's called, like you said, My Bivy, a smartwatch application that first, it's like a machine learning algorithm that watches for 10 days, a watch that watches. But you wear it and it's watching your heart rate and your movements. And in that, it's trying to find a signal of what a traumatic nightmare looks like in someone while they're sleeping. Yeah. And then once we get a really good confidence interval and we're like, yes, that's what a traumatic nightmare looks like, we intervene via haptic feedback, which is fancy $10 words for vibrating the wrist, to pull them out of the night terror without waking them up. So we get just to the threshold of changing their thought process.
And I remember talking with you before the event went, because I was, they were looking for physicians in the area to help with the event. And we were talking about PTSD and what was difficult. And we were talking about sleep. And that was one of the big problems with people with PTSD is their sleep is getting disrupted all the time with these nightmares. I mean, I had these guys coming into my office and saying, like, Doc, I can't sleep. And, we're trying to prescribe them these medications to keep them from getting all worked up from their nightmares. And it's just awesome that the idea kind of fleshed out to a device that can help prevent them from getting nightmares, which completely disrupt their sleep, Right. So what I'd like to talk about here is you really saw that through to even the clinical trial stage. What was that whole process like for you? It's been a crazy year for you. You've been in the national news and like all this stuff has happened.
Yeah, I mean, we got to start with the absolute beginning and the help we got whispering ideas into our ear.
So the way that Tyler and I met is actually as the event was taking place. We just started brainstorming ideas, and Tyler had a couple of ideas, and I had a couple of ideas. And I did mention that a lot of my guys were coming in with nightmares, and it would be cool if some kind of device could help with that. And then Tyler and his team were able to flesh out that idea and really result in what was used to be called My Bivy, but now might be called something different.
Yeah. I guess I could tell the story about how we got from there to where we are now. So we had the hackathon. It went really, really well. We One, I cried. You saw.
It was awesome, by the way. Yeah. So much passion.
I know. It's like I'm an artist, and someone like gave my art a thumbs up, so that's big. So anyways, we decided like, hey, this is a really good idea. We should launch a Kickstarter. So we launched a Kickstarter, raised enough money to start a company. And when we started a company, we got like media all over the place. It was like super overwhelming because I'm used to being effectively like cooped up behind my computer coding. Right. So now I'm going in front of cameras and doing these interviews. And so like we were on like, I was on PBS, BBC, just like all these crazy things I've heard of but never thought I would actually be on them. And so we did that, the ball got rolling, and I met so many cool people. Yeah. So like, of course, the first cool person I met was Cody. But then after Cody, I met like doctors from top hospitals and universities. I met like technology people. I've like had just phone calls with Google and Apple. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from there, like we're getting like all the support and we're rolling forwards and we get to the point of releasing the application. And then we're thinking like, hey, to ensure that this thing is completely safe, we know it's safe, you know it's safe, everyone knows it's safe, but we want it to be like absolutely safe because the crowd we're dealing with is a very, very sensitive population. And we just want to be 100% sure that on every level it's safe. So we did pursue a clinical trial that is, well, in my opinion, going well.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing to see like an idea like that sort of flesh itself out and like have the clinical evidence that, hey, it's actually working. We can do cool stuff with this. I honestly, personally, I think that that's why people picked up the story and ran with it because it was actually like a good thing that the app was doing. And of course, you have your history with PTSD. They covered that quite well in the news story.
Yeah,
so.
Actually, I don't think we've even mentioned that yet. So yeah, my dad served in Iraq 2005, 2006. Came back, had textbook post-Iraq PTSD. Right. And had the traumatic nightmares. And you know, it was about for a good 9 years. You know, so your livelihood like goes down the drain, and like the quality of life, and you can tell in him during those like few years, like especially the first few years after Iraq, that his livelihood was getting a lot worse. But come Hack DC and like hearing about this competition and this theme, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to, you know, just give it a shot. Yeah. Like try to crack that problem. And you know, I didn't think it would work, but it worked. I mean, he's been wearing it. He was the first customer. I know he'll be a customer until the very end. I mean, he's our biggest supporter. Yeah.
And what was that like? Can you take us through the whole process of what happened after Hack DC and how things got rolling? How you kind of came together with the team, right? And you were developing it, fleshing out the different details on biometric parameters on what to use and how it would work.
Yeah, so we actually did like a lot of, we stuck this thing on my dad, and we basically collected a lot of his data. I wore one. I think I had my brother wearing one too, like to be control groups. Like we were doing a full in-family scientific study. Oh, yeah. And so we're collecting all this data, and I'm running a machine learning algorithms, and we just want to call it that, on it to try to figure out like, hey, what's the difference between my brother and I and my dad? You know, we figured out those differences, told the app like, look out for those differences, and now my dad is sleeping better. And so now coming together with a team to make the application, that was a little interesting because like my Hack DC team, we didn't know each other before the competition. I like to refer to us as like the island of misfit toys. Yeah. So like everyone rolls in, like Harvard, MIT roll in, whatever. I'm terrified, and but we're just like these 5 individuals there, and so we're like, hey, let's form a team. So we did, and like, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better outcome. But afterwards, it got a little funny, like trying to create a company where I'm in Minnesota, Chicago, and they're all out here near Washington, D.C.
Yeah, yeah. You think that geography is sort of been shrunk by technology, but it's not always the case. It's always good to be kind of there in person with people to make things work flawlessly, but
I mean, in computer programming, you have like this thing that I like to do. It's kind of oftentimes a punishment for some, but it's pair programming, where you actually have two people coding in front of one computer, and the ideas just flow so quickly and naturally. And you don't get any of that when you're across the country. You can try. I'm sure there's all sorts of collaborative code environments, but it's just not the same.
But it's a good point because, like here, we have the Psychiatry Innovation Lab here in DC, and then just to get people like you out here with the experience in more of like of a tech-heavy hackathon environment. What did you see the difference was between like a tech-heavy hackathon event and what we're doing here at Psychiatry Innovation Lab?
Right, and so, I mean, a hackathon is oftentimes, and I'm going to very much generalize, but I think it's an accurate generalization. It's a lot of people who want to code up something good, and they spend all their time trying to think of a good idea, and it doesn't always come to fruition. So oftentimes you resort to, let's make a social network, let's repeat Snapchat, let's repeat something else, you know? But with this, it had a very specific purpose, and people came in with ideas, and then you just needed a person to, one, like, confirm that the idea is feasible, and two, like, just actually make the idea. But they're all good ideas already. Like, I mean, I went to this event and it was like 6, 7 amazing talks given by these groups. These are the finalists, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I would almost dare say that the Innovation Lab was better than a hackathon because the ideas were top notch.
I definitely thought the quality of the ideas was really good today. And we've been talking about extending out the event to be a full day thing because you're just sitting there and hearing all these ideas and things that people want to do, and the judges' feedback, the audience feedback, and the 4 hours just flies by, and you're like, where did the time go? I felt like I heard so much, but not the depth that I wanted to get to. And also that's why we're doing these interviews. I'm glad you came and talked with us, but we did talk to quite a few of the finalists that were there at the event, and we're able to get a little bit deeper into, you know, their histories and where they come from and what they want to do with their ideas. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, so we talked about forming a team after the event and then bringing it along. How long did it take to get to like the clinical trial stage?
We were actually very fortunate right away. We actually had clinicians reaching out. I know it's unusual, but we had clinicians reach out to us to have it clinically tried, if that's the correct verb.
Like they wanted in their clinic to use with their patients?
Yeah, so basically they wanted to be the ones to do the clinical trial so they could have first access to it. And so like that wasn't a very hard process, and I mean the process, I mean we're like trying to juggle like who gets to do it. But you know, you get all this support from top-notch doctors at top-notch institutions who are effectively collaborating with you, like having a conversation. Like I know my tech, they know psychiatry. Like you like the conversations that we have. Yeah. Like you'll be like, make sure the DSM-5 is up to date, and I'll just be like, what is that? Is that a Java thing? Like I don't know.
And I'm the same way with programming. I don't know hardly anything with the tech world, but I mean that's the way our reality is these days, right? That's the way the world is. Like there's too much information to know everything, so you really have to work together and collaborate to make anything happen.
Right.
And then you also had a lot of experience with the I don't know, what would you call it, like mass media or like news outlets and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it became interesting because I've done some public speaking. Like I gave a graduation speech in high school, so I'm not completely new to it, but I'm like, cameras freak me out. I used to have this thing where I might even in this conversation be like talking really fast or talking way too much with my hands.
Yeah.
And like,
well, you're very obviously well rehearsed now.
Yeah, a little bit.
After a year of interviews.
But it was kind of a crazy thing. So I told my professor Victor, I got back on like the 28th, that Monday, and told my professor Victor, like, hey, I won this hackathon. We implemented this cool R code that we're no longer using, but it used survival analysis, which was the class he was teaching. And he's like, wow, this is awesome. Do you mind if I tell communications, McAllister Communications? I go to McAllister College, went to McAllister College, the best school in the universe. And he passed it on to McAllister Communications, who passed it on to a Minnesota station, who passed it on to our newspaper, who then we were getting calls from like national, like People Magazine, Gizmodo. Gizmodo's not...
People Magazine?
People Magazine. Not for the actual magazine, just for the website.
Oh, okay.
This awesome tech blog called Gizmodo, even though I never heard of it before. They just did one of the cooler interviews. But then it like inflated, so...
I saw you on the Chive one day. I was scrolling through
the Chive,
I was like, the Chive is
Upworthy,
awesome.
BuzzFeed, Reddit, even up to like USA Today, BBC, so that means we went international.
Nice.
So that was cool.
Like rounded it out with the BBC.
And even PBS, so we got like all the bases covered.
Very awesome. Was that experience working with those type of people different? I mean, they're from like a different industry.
It was like, because, and I mean, assuming you're talking about just media folk.
Yeah.
So it is different because I've noticed after a while that there's like some really good interviews and some like not so good interviews.
Yeah.
So the really good interviews like try to like really pick at like my center and be like, why am I doing this? How will this apply to the rest of my life? How will we help humanity?
Yeah.
Or like,
But actually
then,
like interest in you as a person and like.
right. Exactly. Not just like me getting their ratings up.
Yeah.
And so like oftentimes I do like a 45-minute interview that's trimmed to 80 seconds, or not even 80 seconds.
Really?
Yeah, no, it would be horrible. But then you'd have like the worst ones, they'd ask the same questions over and over, like, who are you? Where do you go to school? Like, everybody knows that already. Like, I don't know. I don't mean to seem like I'm like, oh, I'm too good for these interviews, but sometimes people just stopped asking good questions, and that's when it kind of got old for me.
Did you feel like you were kind of like on for show for like people like, here's the kid who came up with the PTSD? Yeah.
You know, for a while, I will admit that I like kind of like dragged it out, you know, like, oh yeah, like I have to go to this interview, you know.
Yeah,
but
like, oh, these dang.
it's only
media
BBC.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
You did some really cool ones. Like you were telling me the Bose one was.
Bose. Okay.
Yeah.
No, this was just a week and a half ago.
Okay.
I went to Bose, and I can't say very much anything about it because I signed a non-disclosure agreement.
Gotcha.
But what I can say is that it was the best, now the second best interview of my life. They just like...
After this one.
I learned things from that interview. Exactly.
Okay.
See, when you learn something about yourself from an interview that you didn't previously know, that's when you know it's a good interview.
Yeah. Excited to see it. When's it going to come out, do you know?
No idea. No idea if it ever will air outside of Bose.
Oh, right. So it might be like an inner company thing. Well, that's disappointing. Maybe we can get our hands on it somehow.
It's okay. Bose is super cool. I liked that.
So what do you have panning out for you in the future here with University of Chicago? What are your plans?
So I'm doing a computer science PhD. I'm in an awesome lab with awesome advisors doing big data systems. So kind of a completely different sphere than my bivvy. But at U Chicago, I am looking to finish my clinical trial. In the meantime, away from U Chicago, looking to dive into research. I've just published my first paper last week, so that's exciting.
Very nice.
And oh gosh, like I guess I got 6 years there, and then I'll get wear that fancy robe thing and walk across the stage.
Lots going on. Super excited for you.
Watch all my friends at Google make more than me.
Well, you can collaborate with them, of course, and
of course
make things happen, make big things happen, like you have. All right, if you guys have any questions for Tyler, you can just post them on the video below, and we'll try to get back to you on that. Thanks so much for being on this, man. Really appreciate it. Cool.
So the biomarkers we're using are heart rate, specifically heart rate variability, velocity of your movements, and the number of movements per second. And so we basically plug those into our machine learning function. We are able to differentiate what is a traumatic nightmare, what is getting up to go to the bathroom, and what is just waking up normally in the morning. And so when there's a traumatic nightmare, after 10 days, my bivvy will actually intervene with increasing intensity vibrations to try to take you out of the night terror without waking you up. And so we've been working to prove this, and it's been going very well. And that it'll start off by oh, someone's having a traumatic nightmare, and it'll just barely vibrate on the wrist. It feels like feathers. And so nothing will happen, nothing's allowed to happen. And it'll just slowly increase the intensity each time until there is a difference made. Before the point of waking the person up, but just high enough to ruin the traumatic nightmare. And so that's pretty much how it works. Oh, and then the data are also put into a database that's accessible by a clinician. And so you can have the interaction between the doctor and their patient, and they can work together to solve traumatic nightmares. Because it's not only MyBivy that you use to solve this problem, it's kind of a band-aid more than anything. You should be doing like the therapies and all of the other things that go into mental wellness. And so you should be collaborating with your doctor while you're using it.